Sing.
Hi, everyone, welcome,
Thanks.
Sara Vieira.
Yay! Hi everyone. So first of all, thank you so much for having me. It is my first time in Armenia, and so far I've been loving it. So thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for coming to the stage and listening to me rambling about random stuff. So I have this problem. I mean, I have plenty, but one of them is that I speak really fast, because the faster I speak, the faster I can get off the stage. So if I'm speaking too fast, please someone in the front row or something, because of the lights I can't see in the back, just like wave or some shit so that I can like calm myself down. Because I get like really excited about like nerd stuff and I'm like, oh my God. Okay, so hi everyone. So my talk is called GraphQL All the Things. I really like GraphQL, and after a while I've realized that you can actually use it as a state management. So this is what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about using GraphQL as a state management. If you're wondering what's happening over here, is the mic is too big for my ears, so it just keeps falling down. So there's going to be a lot of this, and fun. So as I said, my name is Sara, and I am a developer at CodeSandbox. If you've never heard of CodeSandbox, which is a very valid thing, because there's like 5 of us, we are a website maker. No, I'm kidding. We are the online code editor that you can use to build React, Angular, and Vue or anything, and even servers. So it's at CodeSandbox.io. I also have a couple of stickers. I brought a lot, but it turns out the speakers also wanted stickers. So now, yeah, I have like 10. So as in like for personal things, I am really into like terrible movies. As in like, so does anyone know what the movie Sharknado is, for example? Yeah. So like I thrive on that shit. Like it gives me life. I don't know why. And as a true Portuguese person, I'm really into football because that's pretty much all we have. No, I actually prefer Messi to Ronaldo, so I get that. I abandoned my country. We'll get into that right now. Okay, so for anyone who was here for Elizabeth's talk, she said something about moving back, and because she said my body needs good weather. Well, actually mine is the exact opposite. After like 27 degrees, I die inside. I can't survive. So I have moved. I used to live in Porto and Portugal, and I moved to Berlin. And a lot of people get confused, as in like they think that all you need for life is like sun for some reason. And I made a couple of slides to try and explain my move to Berlin and to also like contrast what Elizabeth said. So I think it's honestly the land of sun and amazing architecture. I mean, look at this, it's beautiful. I don't even know where the fuck this is. Gourmet food. I mean, I swear to God, all the food in Berlin is just doner kebabs, which is very sad because I actually don't like doner kebabs. It's a very conservative and German city. So you can't see it here, but like, there's a ton, but like a weird amount of dildo king ads. It's insane. I don't know. And for a while their slogan was save the sausages, and it was just fucking weird. I don't know. It's very German. And I consider myself an airport expert, and it's also the land of best airports. Like, look at this. It looks like it's gonna fall apart at any moment. It's insane. If you ever travel to Berlin, don't go to Schoenfeld. I call it Schoenfeld. It's terrible. But we're not here to talk about airports. I wish, because I could talk about airports for like 2 hours. It's insane. So we're here to talk about GraphQL. I hope you liked that introduction. That was added 20 minutes ago. So I really like GraphQL because, and this is the next thing, is that I think GraphQL is bae. And I have a bunch of like pictures like this, like really meme website pictures. And yesterday I was looking at this picture and I realized that I've lost all the things that I'm wearing. Like, I lost these headphones in a burger joint. I have no idea where the shirt and the jacket are, and it's just a very sad reminder of who I was as a human being and who I am now. I have these really shitty headphones now. It's sad. Okay, so we're going to talk about managing local state with Apollo. Is everyone excited? Thank you. So I want to start by saying something. So I've been looking for him, and I don't think he's here, so that's good. So I don't really like Redux. I don't. I don't know if Dan is here. Dan is great. Like, I'm so sorry, Dan, but I don't. I don't like to change 5 files to change a thing. Like, it's not my kink. I don't like that. It's not my thing. So this is also my vision, as in like how we can improve this. And I want to specify that this is talk mostly if you're already using GraphQL for data fetching. If you're not, it doesn't make a lot of sense. I would tell you to, if you like Redux, to use Redux or MobX or Context, which I honestly been using a lot as well. So one thing that actually happened in my last company was that, so someone came to me and was like, Sarah, because they don't know how to pronounce my name. Neither do I sometimes. We got this awesome React project that is all Apollo and GraphQL. Like, do you want to help? This was when I was a developer advocate, so that was kind of my job. And I was like, that sounds awesome. What do you use for state management? And they like look me dead in the eye, and they're like, Redux. And I'm like, but why? I have a lot of meme photos. Like, it's actually kind of embarrassing. But why would you do that? You can put GraphQL on everything. So my main idea is there's a big context shift if you go from doing Redux or MobX to doing GraphQL. Like, it's a completely different pattern, and everything is just different, so just GQL all the things. It sounds easier, right? So we're going to use Apollo link state, which is a thing to actually manage local state with Apollo. I remember that I was in a train in Portugal, in like one of the 2 trains that we have, actually when this was released, and I remember that I had to turn on my hotspot to actually try it, like a goddamn nerd, at like 10:30 p.m., and it was great. I loved it. Okay, so let's get all technical and stuff. And I'm going to go over how you can actually implement this. So I am going to use React Apollo hooks. So I do know there is a React Apollo, as an Apollo React hooks package, but it's in beta and it doesn't contain everything. So we're going to use this, which is called React Apollo hooks, which basically makes you that you can use things like use query, which will get over it, which will go over it. English is hard. So yes. So there's a couple of things that we need to install. So there's React Apollo, Apollo Boost. So React Apollo is the tool that connects Apollo to React. There's also Vue Apollo and Angular Apollo. So like Apollo Boost is just a collection of things that you need, basically. There is React Apollo hooks, which is the one that we're going to use because we want to use hooks because we're living on the edge of glory. And there's also GraphQL because we're using GraphQL. That makes sense. Okay, so now there's a bunch of code. And it's readable. That's great. Okay, so I don't have a clicker, so you just have to pretend I'm pointing at things. So you import Apollo client from Apollo Boost, and you basically have to create a client for everything. A client is what holds your state and the URI where you're going to get the GraphQL endpoint, all of that stuff. And you can also do a lot of other stuff with it. Wait, the mic's falling. There we go. Okay, so then you have Apollo provider, which is the provider that provides all of the context down, and you pass it to your client. And then since we're using another package, and this is also true for the Apollo beta one, you have to create a new provider, which I call the Apollo hooks provider, and you pass the same client. Quick side note, this has to be in this order, otherwise it doesn't work. Because I did that, and it didn't work, and I couldn't figure out why. So you have to have Apollo provider and then the hooks provider, which if you think about it makes sense, but I wasn't really thinking about it. Okay, so that's done. Everything is set up, but nothing happens in your app. But nothing breaks, so that's good. I mean, that's more than like half the times I do work. So now let's add some state. So Apollo Boost comes by default with state management. So when you create a new Apollo client, you can pass it a URI, and this is the endpoint for your GraphQL thing. So this is the endpoint for my meme website. Makes sense. It's hosted on GraphCMS. Shout out. And then you have client state. And in client state, you have 2 things that you're probably I'm very confused about this. I am confusion. So there's defaults and there's resolvers. And we'll go over which one of these you know what I mean. Okay, so defaults. The defaults are your base state. So when you initiate context, for example, or when we initiate Redux, you need to have a base state, like your base store. And this is the same thing, but they call it defaults here. And in this case, we're going to open a modal because everyone loves modals. I couldn't find anything more boring to do, so I made a modal. But when I show you the demo, it's going to blow your mind. I mean it. I click a button and a modal opens. It's insane. So you have your defaults, and inside of it, I created a new object just for the modal properties, which has visible equals false, so that means it's not open. And then you have a type name. So the type name is a Apollo GraphQL thing. And this is because, so Apollo has its own cache. And this is how, for example, if you're on a website that has Apollo, and you're in a list of movies, and then you enter a movie, and then you go back, it doesn't actually reload anything. That's because Apollo stores things in a cache. But to know what thing is what and when that happened and what the hell you're trying to do, it uses type names. That's how it defines, like, this is for the modal. So it's something that it's not really necessary, but it's recommended that you use that so that Apollo doesn't get like, what? You never want Apollo to get like, what? It really screws up your cache, and your website just goes bananas, and you're like, what? And then like Apollo's like, what? And you're like, what? And everyone's like, what the fuck? This was not scripted. Nice talk, guys. Thanks. Okay. So then we have resolvers. So resolvers is basically where all the magic happens. So you get something and you give it something back. So I'm going to give you the example of a GraphQL Apollo server. So in a GraphQL Apollo server, let's say you need to get a REST endpoint, and then you need to return it to GraphQL. So what that does is it basically goes somewhere, fetches all that data, and then it transforms it, and then it returns it. So that's exactly what a resolver does. It has an object, transforms that object, and returns another thing, or the same thing. So it's usually a function that doesn't have any side effects, a pure function that nailed it, functional programming. It's usually a pure function. And this is how you can update Apollo cache. Okay, so in this case, I have a mutation, and you can define mutations and queries, but usually queries you don't really need to, because, like, let me go back. So you have this, and you can query like this, basically. So you can query modal and visible. So it's the same structure. And, yes, okay. So I have the data that I'm going to put, and I'm basically just going to, I'm just going to open the modal. So I'm going to set visible to true, and type name to modal. And what I do is that I tell the cache to write this data. So this is the same data that I have as the defaults, but I change it to true. And then I return null, and that's because if I don't return anything, ESLint complains, and it's not a good practice to return the cache. Doesn't make sense. So you can return null, return the cache, it's okay. So you basically you get the cache, and you tell it, like, I have this, and I want to put this in the cache, and you say, write data. And that's it. Okay, so let's write the mutation. Like, how do you actually do the GQL part of the equation? So I did GraphQL for a very long time, which I didn't know what GQL means, and it means GraphQL Query Language. Bomb of knowledge right there. Should have known that. Do you know what JSX means? What? JSXML. Did you like to know that? Because I didn't. So GQL is the GraphQL query language, and it's usually written in a very verbose way. So there is this thing called GQL that you can import from Apollo Boost. And so the only weird thing about this is you have that at client. So what this means is that we need to tell Apollo and their cache that do not go to the server for this. Do not try to hit any endpoint. This is in the cache, so this is in the client. There's also an at rest, because you can actually make GraphQL things from REST endpoints. So when you say that rest, it means do not go to the GraphQL endpoint, go to the REST endpoint. So this is just a thing for Apollo to know, like, what the hell am I supposed to do with this? And as you can see, the name is the same. I'm pointing at my own screen. So open modal. I don't have a clicker. So the query, like the other GQL part of the equation, and this is the same. So you call it modal. So the main reason why you would want to name a query is so that you don't get you don't cry on the inside when you're trying to debug GraphQL. Because if you don't name it, everything is called query 1, and you're like, great, thanks, that's great. Please name your queries. And then you say, I want to get to modal, but you need to know that the modal is at the client, so please don't try to go to the server. You're just going to screw up my entire application. And I want to know if it's visible. So that is the thing that's inside of the object. Okay, so we made a bunch of stuff, but we actually made nothing, so that's great. So how do we actually call these things? How do we make them work? So I'm going to start with use query. And as you may have imagined, you can use a query. Insane. These namings that the React people come with, goddamn. Okay, so you import getModal, which is the thing that I made, and then you import useQuery from React Apollo hooks. And when you import it, you have a bunch of things that you can pass it, like the variables and all of that stuff. But the first argument is just the query. So we're going to say useQuery, and you're going to use the getModal. Wait, I got this. The getModal query. And from that, you return 3 things. So you return the data, you return the loading, and you return the error. So to know what you want to do with the data, the loading, and the error, I do a bunch of ifs, and we'll go over how to make this simple. So you say if it's loading, just return loading. If error, return error and what the error is. And if there's data, I want to get the modal out of it because that's the only thing that I'm using. And I want to say, if modal.visible is equal to true, please show me a modal. Cool. Does this make sense? I can't see anyone. I can't see people. I don't know why I asked that. Cool. So, but your next question is, why is this so big? I thought you said you didn't like Redux because there was a lot of code. Good point. You got me there. Let's do this. Let's make this smaller. And so I'm going to create one use query. So my idea is that in 90% of the examples in your life, when it comes to a UI, you have the same loading and you have the same errors. As in, like, if you don't, please talk to your designer. You're supposed to. You're supposed to always, like, don't create 5 different spinners. People get confused. I get confused. So what I did is that I created my own use query. So it's not really a hook. It's mostly just you pass it all of the props. So because you have to pass it, you pass the props exactly the same way as you pass it there. So if you pass a query and then the variables and everything, you just pass it down. You just say, OK, use these props and go get me things. Go to the internet, be free, get me stuff. And if it's loading, return like your loading spinner. If there's an error, return your error thing. And if there's not, just return the data. So this means that when you use this exact component, you will actually only get the data back. You don't have to worry about loadings or errors because that's handled by the tiny component that you made, which doesn't, yeah, it's a component. Let's go with that. So our code now looks like this, which looks way smaller, like it can fit in one screen. So you import React, you import your modal, and you import from components query, you import that use query that I created. And then you say, const data equals use query, and I get the modal out of it. So you can actually make it a lot smaller and way more concise, because the thing is, it's always going to use the same loadings and the same errors. So I need to take a water break. There we go. Cool. And the good thing is that it fits in one slide. And that's all my point with code. Is like, can you make it under 100 characters? Yes. Babel can do that for me. But the real truth is, but there's like literally no modal because you can't open it. This is only the query. And the query says that the modal visible is false. So let's use mutation. So use mutation will allow you to call mutation. So the main difference between query and mutation is that one changes and one gets things. So it's like a post and a get. So on use mutation, you actually pass it the same thing. So you pass it, first of all, you pass it the mutation that you want to do, and then all the params after that. So, and then this returns the function that you call. So open modal is the function that you can call to actually run that mutation that we did at the start. So this doesn't actually need to be called open modal. There's a lot of people that have decided to use the keyword mutate for everything, which sounds kind of weird and alien to me. But I've also watched way too many horror movies, so I'm not sure if it's me. Maybe it's me. So I stick with normal names. So you have const open modal equals use mutation, and since it passes no variables, you just have to call that function. When you call that function, it runs the mutation that sets visible to true, and then magic, you'll get a modal, which everyone wants. OK, but maybe you still think that's too much code. And I mean, it's a very simple mutation to the cache, so it actually kind of is too much code. So can we make this smaller? Yes. So there is this thing called use Apollo client. And what this does is that it gets you, it basically returns you the entire cache. So instead of you trying to mutate it and get the queries and get the mutations and everything, it just tells you, like, here's the cache, do whatever you want with it. So this means that you don't need to define any resolvers. You don't need to define any defaults. You just tell it, have fun. Here's the cache. Do whatever you want. So it can get out of hand pretty fast. So please be careful with that. OK, so there's also a hook, because there's a hook for everything. If you go on the internet, I swear to God, if there's anything you want to do, there's a hook for it. This is all Dan's fault. God damn it, Dan. What are you doing making the internet a better place, boy? So you get use Apollo client, and this returns you the client. So the client and cache are actually the exact same thing. Just putting it out there. But sometimes people call it client, sometimes people call it cache, because the world is a confusing place. So you have use Apollo client, and this returns you your client, to which you can write data. So if you remember one of my first slides, which I can't, god damn, can I? I'm not going to try it. I'm not going to try it. So you can do client.write data, and you basically just write everything back to it. So you can say data, modal, and visible equals true. So this basically does everything that the other thing did. So you basically tell it, okay, so cool. You want to use the client, here's every cache that you have, and it has a method called write data to appended to it. You call it and you say, write this entire object to it, and that's it. Okay, but I want to be very, like, don't use this for very complicated things because you will lose everything else that's on your cache. Also, please spread your cache. That sounded weird. You know what I mean. So, and now you're asking, like, where's the mutation? You don't need to write any mutation because all of this is done on the fly. This is just, so you can also treat your cache like an object and just change it. And Apollo will take care of the, like, maintaining that the cache is the same everywhere and also normalizing it and making it, like, all the fancy things that we don't want to do. Cool. So, okay, but the main question that I know that you're all asking, I don't know why I made this a slide. So, can you make the query and the mutation in one slide? Watch me, I can actually do that. I've tried very hard for this moment. I'm not writing anything. So you have the query for modal open. Okay, so wait, that's not the slide. Is it this the slide? Yeah. So you have, and you get the data from use query, and then you get the client, you write it, and then you get it. So you get that data, and then on the client you say write data and put everything in it, and when you get that, you just say data.modal.visible to show if it's visible or not. So yeah, but the modal doesn't close, and that is literally the worst thing that can ever happen to anyone. I mean, I'm dead serious. Don't do this to me. I will turn off JavaScript, I swear to God. Fine, okay, we'll close the modal, we'll be GDPR compliant or whatever the thing is, and we'll stop tracking you and all of the weird stuff, and we'll close this modal. Okay, so in this case, we have modal open, and you get that, for example. And then I have this function here called change state. So you can also just change it back to what it was, but in this case, I said, okay, so you get a value, and out of it, I want you to write that data modal open equals the value that you get. So this means that when I click the button, I just call change state equals true. And when I call that, it basically writes the data to it and says the data modal open is equal to this value, which means true, and the modal will open. And then you check if modal is open equals to the thing that you got at the top, so data.modal open, and if it is, it will show it. And on the request close is a thing from React modal that basically says if you clicked ask, if you clicked outside, just a bunch of stuff that it checks. And if all of these are true, if any of these are true, it will basically call it with change state, and it will call it with false. And it will close the modal. Insane. So you're not gonna guess, but I have a demo. So everyone is gonna look very excited as I show you a modal opening. So there's a button and a modal, and y'all gonna be flabbergasted, I swear to God. I love this word. So yay, CodeSandbox, yay! Don't fuck up on me, boy. Okay, so I have a client, and as you can see, I don't have anything in here. So I have client state, which I need to define, but the defaults and the resolvers are empty. So I don't need anything, and then I just import this main. And in this main file, I have this modal open, so wait, Command-Shift-P. Settings. There we go. Beautiful. Is it? Did it work? I'm not actually sure. Okay, so now it's bigger. So, and then you get this change state, and like I said, it's the exact same thing as I did, and you call this change state, that calls client.write data. And you're gonna see something insane. So if I click it, a modal opens. It's insane, I know. It's like the most boring thing that I could ever do. But if you click outside, wait, it closes. Who would have known? I know, right? So this is the only file that you need, and this actually has too much code, because now we can also do this, and it still works. Amazing, even less code. So now put all the variables named foo and bar, and you're good to go. So yeah, on click, you change the state back to the value that you gave it, and it just like automatically updates the state like this. If you have more than this, obviously, please don't call it modal open, because when you click it like true, every modal will open, which no, actually, please do that. That sounds great. Please open every modal at the same time. Okay, yeah, so this is pretty much what I wanted to show you. It's more of another way of doing things. So I don't think there's any right way of doing things. There are wrong ways of doing things. Do not get me wrong. But I don't think there's any right way of doing things. And it all depends on what you prefer. Like if I'm making a project that already has GraphQL everywhere, I will just use this. But if you're using a project that doesn't have any GraphQL, honestly, it doesn't make sense because you're just making the mind shift, but in another direction, which doesn't make a lot of sense. Yeah, so I think that's about it. Is it? Yeah, oh no, yeah. So I made a workshop in Kiev last year, and I put it all on the web because I own way too many domains. I have a problem with domains as well, and stickers. Mostly domains and stickers, yeah, let's go with that. So it's at letslearngraphql.com, and it basically covers the back end and the front end of making a small GraphQL app. It also uses GraphCMS, and you basically use a bunch of like talks from speakers and stuff, and you create talks, delete it, and do a bunch of stuff. It's completely free. It's all on YouTube. You don't even have to use the website. I just wanted an excuse to make a fancy website. It's back when I was really bored. Now I have a job that keeps me up at night. No, I don't. It's fine. So yeah, thank you so much. I do have the slides online. They're at geekul/all/things.now.sh. They're not mobile compatible. That was literally a complaint that I had once. Someone like tweeted me and it was like, this doesn't work on my phone. I'm like, it's amazing that it works anywhere. It's fucking Markdown, god damn it. Why are you judging me? It's literally Markdown. Like the fact that this works anywhere is a fucking miracle of technology. So yeah, doesn't work on your phone, be careful with that. GQL, all the things that now that SH. And if anyone, no, I don't think we have time for questions, do we? I have a Q&A later. Please don't make me have 2 Q&As. That'd be great. So if you have any questions, I will be here all day. I wanted to say something else. I have like 20 CodeSandbox stickers. So this goes to the first 20 people that come. Sorry about that. Have a great day. Thank you.